At 2:47 p.m. on November 22, 1944, Private First Class Raymond Kowalski crouched behind a rubble wall in Fort Driant, Metz, France, holding a device that looked like a medieval crossbow welded to a pipe bomb. 90 yards away, 7 German officers stood in a stone chamber, visible through a narrow window. They were studying tactical maps, planning counterattacks, making decisions that would kill American soldiers in the coming days. Kowalski's hands were steady on the launcher. 3 feet of steel pipe, truck leaf springs, welding rod frame, 12 pounds total weight. The incendiary bolt loaded in the launch rail weighed 3.2 pounds, 18 inches of steel tube filled with jellied gasoline and white phosphorus. The fuse was armed. The spring was cocked. The trajectory was calculated. 8 men crouched behind him. His squad. They'd been calling his device Kowalski's toy for 3 days. The medieval crossbow. The fire arrow. Robin Hood equipment for fighting Nazis. They weren't laughing now. Now they were watching to see if truck springs and chemistry could do what 70-pound flamethrowers couldn't. Kill without exposing the man holding the weapon. The math was simple. Standard assault doctrine meant artillery bombardment, then infantry advance with flamethrower support. Battalion S2 estimated 12 to 18 casualties. Kowalski's device offered different math. 1 shot, 90 yards, silent, 0 operator exposure, maybe 0 casualties. If it worked. The air smelled like cordite and wet stone and jellied gasoline from his bolt. His finger rested on the trigger, adapted from a German MG-34. Required 6 pounds of pull. The German officers were still visible through the window. Still planning, still breathing. 3 days earlier, his company commander had told him to throw the launcher away. Unauthorized weapon, non-standard ammunition, violation of regulations. But 3 days earlier, men were still dying at 35 yards trying to reach bunkers with flamethrowers that only worked at 30 yards. Kowalski had watched 3 of them die. The last one was his friend. November 1944. Metz, France. The U.S. Third Army faced German defenders entrenched in 19th century fortifications. Stone walls 8 feet thick. Underground passages, overlapping fields of fire. The kind of defensive positions that required close-range weapons to clear. The kind that killed men who tried to get close. Standard infantry doctrine used flamethrowers for bunker clearance. The M2 flamethrower, 68 pounds empty, 70 pounds with fuel. Effective range, 20 to 40 yards maximum. Fuel duration, 8 to 10 seconds of continuous fire. The operator wore 2 tanks of jellied gasoline on his back and carried a nozzle that shot flame 30 yards on a good day. The problem was getting to 30 yards. German MG-42s had effective range exceeding 200 yards. That meant flamethrower operators had to advance 170 yards under machine gun fire before they could even threaten a bunker. Most didn't make it. By November 18th, the Third Army had lost 43 flamethrower operators in Metz. 43 men who strapped on fuel tanks and walked toward German positions and died before reaching effective range. Shot at 35 yards, 40 yards, 38 yards, always too far, always short of the range where fire could do its job. The pattern never changed. German defenders saw the flamethrower operator coming, identified him by the tanks on his back, concentrated fire on him, killed him before he got close enough to matter. Sometimes the fuel tanks ruptured. Then the operator burned. Sometimes they didn't rupture. Then he just bled out in no man's land while his squad listened. Kowalski had watched 3 flamethrower operators die in 5 days. The first was Private Dennis Cooper. November 14th. Cooper was advancing on casemate 17 when German machine gun fire caught him at 38 yards. 3 rounds punched through his fuel tank. The jellied gasoline ignited. Cooper burned for 4 minutes. Kowalski was 20 yards away, close enough to hear the screaming. Too far to reach him. Too far to help. Cooper died still holding the nozzle. The second was Sergeant Michael Rousseau, November 16th. Rousseau made it to 25 yards, got 1 burst of flame off before the MG-42 cut him down. He died instantly. The bunker stayed operational. 6 more men died in the follow-up assault trying to finish what Rousseau started. 7 casualties total because effective range was 30 yards and Rousseau died at 25. The third was Private James Bradley. November 18th. Bradley was the one that changed everything. Bradley was from Detroit, same as Kowalski. They'd worked together at Ford River Rouge plant before the war. Tool and die makers, precision manufacturing. They'd enlisted together, trained together, shipped overseas together. Bradley got assigned to flamethrower duty because he volunteered. Said somebody had to do it. Might as well be him. He died at 35 yards. The fuel tank didn't rupture. He just took 3 rounds through the chest and went down. It took 20 minutes for him to bleed out. Kowalski held his hand, listened to him talk. Bradley kept saying the same thing. "Too far, Ray. It's too far. Can't get close enough." Kowalski watched his friend die because effective range was 30 yards and German machine guns killed at 35 yards, and those 5 yards meant everything. That night he couldn't sleep. Kept seeing Bradley's face, kept hearing his voice. Too far, too far. Can't get close enough. The problem was mechanical. The solution had to be mechanical too. Raymond Kowalski was 24 years old, born and raised in Detroit, Michigan. Polish family, Catholic, 3 brothers. His father worked the Ford assembly line. Kowalski went into tool and die. Precision work. Making parts that fit together exactly right. Tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. He understood how things worked, how metal bent, how springs stored energy, how force transferred through mechanical systems. Before the war, he'd built custom tools for Ford's production lines. After Pearl Harbor, he enlisted. Army assigned him to the 5th Infantry Division's engineer detachment. Demolitions, fortifications, equipment repair. He was quiet, methodical, saw problems as mechanical puzzles. Other soldiers talked about tactics and courage and fighting spirit. Kowalski thought about physics and engineering and whether the equipment worked. The flamethrower didn't work. Not the way it needed to work. The weapon itself functioned fine at 30 yards. But getting to 30 yards killed the operator. That wasn't a tactics problem. That was a range problem. November 18th, 11:30 p.m., Kowalski sat alone in the engineer tent, staring at the M2 flamethrower technical manual, reading the specifications over and over. Maximum effective range, 40 yards. Fuel capacity, 4 gallons. Burn time, 10 seconds. The numbers didn't work. A flamethrower operator had to close from 200 yards to 30 yards under direct fire. German machine guns could kill him anywhere in that range. Survival depended on speed and luck. Mostly luck. And luck was running out. 43 dead operators proved that. Kowalski closed the manual, looked at his hands. Grease under the fingernails from working on equipment all day. Hands that had held Bradley while he died. Hands that could build things, fix things, make things that worked better. The insight came slowly, not a flash. Just a simple realization that wouldn't go away. Don't carry fire to the target. Send fire to the target. Flamethrowers required the operator to walk into the kill zone. to expose himself completely, to rely on 30 yards of flame after surviving 170 yards of machine gun fire. That was the design. That was the limitation. That was why men died. But fire could travel farther than 30 yards. Fire could be launched, could be projected, could be sent to the target while the operator stayed behind cover. Kowalski thought about medieval siege weapons, catapults, trebuchets, crossbows, mechanical systems that stored energy and released it on command. Systems that threw things farther than a man could throw them. That's what was needed. Not a weapon you carried to the enemy. A weapon that carried fire to the enemy. A crossbow. That was the answer. Not the medieval kind with a bow and string. A modern version, springs instead of bow limbs. Steel pipe for the launch rail, high-energy storage released by trigger mechanism. Launch an incendiary projectile instead of an arrow. Jellied gasoline payload. White phosphorus fuse. Effective range, 80 to 100 yards, silent operation. No muzzle flash. Fire from cover. Hit the target without exposing the operator. The geometry worked. The physics worked. The materials existed. Salvaged truck springs. Steel pipe, welding equipment. German ammunition depots full of parts. Everything needed was available. Kowalski started sketching. Rough drawings on the back of equipment requisition forms. Spring mounting system, launch rail dimensions, trigger mechanism, projectile design. The sketches got more detailed, more precise. Hours passed. The tent was dark except for one small work light. Other engineers slept. Kowalski kept drawing. By 0300 hours, he had a complete technical diagram. A spring-loaded launcher that could send fire 90 yards while the operator stayed in cover. It violated every piece of Army doctrine, used non-standard components, required hand-fabricated ammunition, would never pass any official review, but it would keep men alive at 35 yards. November 19th, 0600 hours. Lieutenant Morrison found Kowalski at the workbench. The sketches were spread across the table. Morrison picked up one, studied it for 30 seconds. What is this? A launcher, sir, for incendiary projectiles. We have flamethrowers. Flamethrowers work at 30 yards. Men die at 35. Morrison set the sketch down. That's why we train them. Better tactics, better approach vectors. Better tactics don't change physics, sir. Maximum effective range is 40 yards. German machine guns kill at 200 yards. The math doesn't work. The math is classified material handled by battalion intelligence. Your job is maintaining equipment. My job is keeping men alive. Morrison stared at him. Private, I'm telling you to drop this. We have doctrine. We have approved weapons. We follow regulations. Kowalski looked at the sketches, at the calculations, at the design that could send fire 90 yards while the operator stayed behind cover. Then he looked at Morrison. 43 operators dead in 3 weeks, sir. All following doctrine. Morrison's face hardened. That's enough. Focus on your assigned duties. Dismissed. Kowalski left the tent, walked to the salvage area, destroyed vehicles, German equipment, bombed out structures. Everything he needed was there. Truck leaf springs, steel pipe, welding rod, parts from 100 different machines. Sergeant Frank Murphy found him at 0800 hours. Murphy was the squad sergeant, 32 years old, Chicago, construction worker before the war. He watched Kowalski sorting through springs for 10 minutes before speaking. Morrison told you to drop the launcher project. Yes. You're not dropping it. No. Murphy lit a cigarette. Building unauthorized weapons gets you court-martialed. Sending men with flamethrowers to die gets them killed. That's not your call to make. Kowalski selected a leaf spring from a destroyed deuce and a half, 18 inches long. Good steel, no cracks. Bradley died saying it was too far. Cooper burned for 4 minutes. Russo made it to 25 yards, and it wasn't close enough. That's 3 men in 5 days. How many more before someone decides there's a better way? Murphy smoked his cigarette, watched Kowalski test the spring tension, finally spoke. How sure are you this thing will work? 60%. Maybe 70 if I can test it first. 60%. And you're willing to risk court-martial on 60% odds? I'm willing to risk court-martial to stop watching friends die. Murphy dropped the cigarette, crushed it with his boot. You've got 48 hours before the next assault on Fort Driant. 48 hours to build something that works. Miss your deadline and Morrison will have you cleaning latrines until the war ends. Make it work, and maybe we stop losing men at 35 yards. Kowalski picked up the spring, felt the tension, did the calculations in his head. Spring rate, launch velocity, projectile weight, trajectory. 90 yards was achievable. Silent launch was achievable. Fire delivery was achievable. Keeping men alive was achievable. 48 hours, he said. I'll need help. You'll get it. That night, Kowalski started building the weapon that would kill 7 German officers in 14 seconds and disappear from history without ever receiving an official designation. Started with salvaged truck springs and 3 men working in darkness. Started with the idea that fire could be sent instead of carried. Started because 43 flamethrower operators died following doctrine and someone had to build something better. November 22nd was 48 hours away. November 19th, 1,500 hours. Kowalski stood in a destroyed German ammunition depot 2 miles behind American lines. Artillery had hit it on November 12th, 6 days of exposure to weather. The roof was gone. 2 walls collapsed, but the structural steel remained. The workbenches remained. And most importantly, the welding equipment remained. Damaged, but functional. He'd brought a list. Written on the back of a maintenance form, 7 items needed. Truck leaf springs for launch energy, steel pipe for barrel and launch rail, welding rod for frame construction, release mechanism from German MG-34 for trigger system, sheet metal for projectile casings, glass vials for fuse mechanisms, white phosphorus from salvaged German grenades. The springs came first. He found them in a destroyed deuce and a half buried in rubble. The truck had taken a direct artillery hit. Engine blocks shattered, frame twisted, but the leaf springs under the chassis were intact. He pulled 2 complete sets, cut one down to 18 inches with a hacksaw, tested the tension by hand. Good steel, proper temper, approximately 40 pounds of force when compressed 2 inches. That would generate enough launch velocity for 80 to 90 yards, maybe more. Steel pipe was everywhere. Plumbing from destroyed buildings. German equipment, artillery shell casings. He selected a 3-foot length of 2-inch diameter pipe. No cracks, no corrosion, straight along its length within acceptable tolerance. He tested it by sighting down the bore, close enough for a launch rail. By 1,700 hours, he had everything except the white phosphorus. That required going to the ordnance disposal area, the place where combat engineers dumped unexploded German munitions until they could be destroyed. Dangerous work. But white phosphorus was essential. It ignited on contact with air, burned at 1,300 degrees Fahrenheit, couldn't be extinguished with water, perfect for incendiary applications. He found 6 German Model 39 grenades, white phosphorus payload. The casings were intact. He marked them with chalk, signed them out on the disposal log. Nobody asked questions. Engineers pulled munitions all the time for demolition work. Sergeant Murphy showed up at 1900 hours, brought 2 more men, Private Eddie Clark and Private First Class Martin Webb. Clark had been a chemistry student before the war. Webb was a welder, pre-war job building bridges in Pennsylvania. Murphy didn't ask permission, didn't explain, just showed up with the men and said, "If you're building something stupid, might as well build it properly." They worked in a stone building 400 yards from the command post. Far enough to avoid officer scrutiny, close enough to return for morning duties. The building had been a storage facility, German quartermaster depot. Now it was empty except for broken furniture and shell casings. Webb set up the welding equipment, German arc welder, required a portable generator. They positioned it outside to reduce noise. Ran cables through a window. The generator sound would be noticeable, but not unusual. Engineers ran generators constantly for equipment repair. Kowalski laid out the components, explained the design. Spring-loaded launch system. The leaf spring would be mounted parallel to the steel pipe, compressed and locked by a catch mechanism. Trigger would release the catch. Spring would drive a pusher plate forward along the launch rail. Pusher plate would accelerate the projectile. Projectile would leave the rail at approximately 180 feet per second. Webb looked at the springs, at the pipe, at Kowalski's sketches. "This is a crossbow. It's a spring-loaded launcher. It's a crossbow that shoots fire. You built a medieval siege weapon. I built a delivery system with 90-yard range that doesn't require the operator to expose himself." Murphy interrupted. "Does it work?" "In theory. Theory and $3 gets you a cup of coffee. Can you build it?" "Yes." "How long?" 2 nights, maybe 3. You've got 2. Fort Dryant assault is November 22nd at 1400 hours. You missed that window, and Morrison will bury this project permanently. They started at 2100 hours. Night work only. Tactica. Blackout meant minimal lighting. German observation posts could see electric lights from miles away. They worked by shielded lantern. Enough light to see the welds, not enough to draw attention. Webb cut the leaf spring first, 18 inches. The cutting took 40 minutes. Hand hacksaw, slow work. The steel was hardened. Cutting generated heat. He stopped every 5 minutes to let the blade cool. When finished, he had 1 leaf spring section and 4 smaller pieces. The smaller pieces would become the catch mechanism and trigger components. Kowalski welded the mounting brackets while Webb worked. The brackets would hold the spring parallel to the launch rail. 4 brackets total, welded to the pipe at 4-inch intervals. The welds had to be precise. Too weak, and the spring would tear free under launch stress. Too much weld, and the added weight would affect balance. Each weld took 3 minutes. He worked slowly, checked alignment after each one. The pipe had to remain straight. Any curve would affect trajectory. Webb watched him work, nodded approval. "You know your way around a torch? Tool and die maker, Ford River Rouge. You built car parts with this kind of precision? Engine components, tolerances in thousandths of an inch. This isn't engine work. This is weapons manufacturing. This is keeping men alive past 35 yards. Clark was working on the projectiles. That was the critical component. The launcher was just springs and pipe, relatively simple mechanics. But the projectiles required chemistry, required precision, required components that would survive launch stress and detonate on impact. He'd designed them based on German stick grenades, steel tube, 18 inches long, 1.5 inches diameter, sealed at both ends. Internal payload, jellied gasoline mixed with white phosphorus chips. Impact fuse at the nose, Spring-loaded pin behind glass vial. On impact, the pin would break the vial. Air would contact the white phosphorus. Ignition would occur within milliseconds. The first projectile took 90 minutes to fabricate. Clark worked carefully. The white phosphorus was volatile. Exposure to air meant immediate ignition. He worked in a sealed container. Nitrogen atmosphere created by burning paper in a metal box to consume the oxygen. Primitive but effective. The tube was sealed with threaded end caps. Gaskets cut from German gas mask filters. Tight enough to prevent air infiltration. The fuse mechanism went in last. Spring from a German grenade. Glass vial from a medical kit. Assembly required steady hands and patience. By 0200 hours, they had one complete projectile. 3.2 pounds, 18 inches long. Payload, approximately 4 ounces of white phosphorus suspended in 12 ounces of jellied gasoline. Estimated burn radius, 12 to 15 feet. Burn duration, 40 to 50 seconds. The launcher frame was 90% complete, spring-mounted. Trigger mechanism installed, only the pusher plate remained. That was Webb's work. Cut from sheet steel, shaped to fit the launch rail, welded to a connecting rod that attached to the spring. When the spring released, it would drive the pusher plate forward, accelerating the projectile. 0300 hours, frame complete. They tested it dry. No projectile, just the spring mechanism. Kowalski compressed the spring 2 inches, engaged the catch, pulled the trigger. The spring released with a sharp metallic snap. The pusher plate shot forward, slammed into the front stop. The recoil shook the entire assembly. Problem: the recoil was too violent. The frame welds showed stress cracks. The design needed reinforcement. Webb added gussets. Triangular braces welded at stress points, added 3 pounds to the total weight but doubled the structural strength. They tested again. Same procedure. The frame held. No cracks. The recoil was still significant but manageable. Murphy checked his watch. 0340. You've got 4 hours until morning formation. Get some sleep. None of them slept. They kept working. Clark fabricated 2 more projectiles. Webb reinforced the frame further. Kowalski built a rudimentary sight system, notch and post, cut from sheet metal, welded to the top of the launch rail. Not precise, but better than nothing. By 0600 hours, they had a complete launcher and 3 projectiles. Total weight, 12 pounds. Length, 3 feet. Width, 6 inches. It looked exactly like what Webb said it looked like. A crossbow welded to a pipe bomb. The question was whether it worked. November 21st, 0500 hours. Kowalski, Murphy, Clark, and Webb drove to an abandoned quarry 3 miles from camp. Isolated location. Stone walls on 3 sides. Open sky above. Perfect for testing. Dangerous for testing. White phosphorus ignition would create smoke visible for miles. They had maybe 30 minutes before dawn. After that, smoke would draw attention. The first test would be dry fire. No projectile, just spring mechanics. Kowalski loaded the launcher, compressed the spring, engaged the catch, aimed at the quarry wall 50 yards away, pulled the trigger. The spring released. The pusher plate shot forward. The launcher jerked back. The recoil was significant. But the frame held. No cracks, no failures. Murphy reloaded. Compressed the spring again. Recoil's going to be a problem. Operator needs a braced position. Agreed. Fire from prone or supported against cover. What about accuracy? Unknown until we test with a projectile. Then let's test with a projectile. Clark brought the first bolt, handed it to Kowalski carefully. Glass vial in the nose. Don't drop it. Kowalski loaded the bolt into the launch rail. It fit snugly. the pusher plate seated against the base. He compressed the spring. 2 inches of compression, 40 pounds of force. His hands were steady. The catch engaged. The bolt was ready. Target, stone wall 50 yards away, marked with chalk. 2-foot circle. If the bolt hit anywhere in that circle, accuracy was acceptable for bunker-sized targets. Kowalski braced the launcher against a rock, aimed using the notch and post sights. The wall filled his sight picture. He exhaled halfway, pulled the trigger. The spring released. The bolt launched. The recoil slammed into his shoulder. The bolt flew in a flat arc, traveled 35 yards, hit the ground. Didn't ignite. Failure. Murphy walked to the impact point, examined the bolt. Nose is intact. Fuse didn't trigger. Impact wasn't hard enough. Spring tension is insufficient. They returned to the launcher. Kowalski compressed the spring further. 3 inches instead of 2. That increased the force to approximately 60 pounds. More stress on the frame, more recoil. But more launch velocity. Second test, 05:47 hours. Dawn was 12 minutes away. They had time for maybe 2 more shots before light made smoke too visible. Kowalski loaded a fresh bolt. Compressed the spring 3 inches. The spring fought back. Required both hands to engage the catch. The launcher was under significant stress. He could hear the frame creaking. He braced against the rock again, aimed at the wall. This time he adjusted the angle. 30 degrees instead of 45. Lower trajectory, higher velocity at impact. Trigger pull. Spring release. Launch. The bolt shot from the rail faster. The trajectory was flatter. It traveled 68 yards. Hit the wall. Impacted hard. Nothing happened. Then everything happened. The glass vials shattered. White phosphorus contacted air. Chemical ignition occurred in milliseconds. The jellied gasoline payload ignited. Fire erupted across a 15-foot radius. The stone wall disappeared behind orange flame and black smoke. Temperature at the impact point, approximately 1,300 degrees Fahrenheit. The fire burned with intense heat. Smoke billowed upward. Murphy stared. Jesus Christ. Webb was already timing it. Counting seconds. The fire burned for 47 seconds before consuming all fuel. The smoke continued rising. Would be visible for miles. "We need to leave," Clark said. "That smoke's going to draw attention." But Kowalski was doing calculations. 68 yards at 30-degree angle with 3 inches of spring compression. To reach 90 yards, he needed 32 degrees, maybe 33. The spring tension was adequate. The fuse mechanism worked. The payload was effective. "One more test," he said. "We're out of time." "One more. I need to confirm 90-yard range." Murphy looked at the sky. Dawn was coming, light on the eastern horizon. But they'd come this far. "Make it fast." Third test, 06:38 hours, the last bolt, the last chance to confirm range before returning to camp. Kowalski loaded it. Compressed the spring 3 inches, adjusted the angle to 32 degrees, aimed at a section of wall 80 yards away, marked with chalk. 2-foot circle. The bolt launched. Traveled in a flatter arc than before. Covered 82 yards. Impacted the wall inside the marked circle. The fuse triggered. White phosphorus ignited. Fire spread. The payload burned. 90-yard range confirmed. Accuracy within acceptable limits. Silent operation confirmed. The launcher worked. They packed the equipment, drove back to camp, arrived at 07:30 hours. Morning formation was at 0800. They had 30 minutes to clean up and report for duty. Nobody said anything about smoke rising from the quarry 3 miles away. Nobody asked questions about why 4 engineers smelled like cordite and jellied gasoline. They fell into formation, answered roll call, received daily assignments. By noon, the entire squad had heard about Kowalski's toy, the medieval crossbow, the fire arrow, the device that threw fire 90 yards. Some thought it was clever, others thought it was insane. Corporal Jimmy Diaz called it Robin Hood equipment for fighting Nazis. Lieutenant Morrison heard about it at 1400 hours. Found Kowalski in the motor pool. I told you to drop this project. Yes, sir. You built it anyway. Yes, sir. Morrison stared at the launcher, at the 3-foot pipe and spring mechanism. Does it work? 82 yards. Silent launch. Confirmed ignition. You tested it. This morning, 0500 hours. Without authorization. Yes, sir. Morrison was quiet for 15 seconds. Then he picked up a casualty report from his field desk. Fort Dryant assault is tomorrow at 1400 hours. Intelligence confirms German command post in stone chamber. Ground level. Narrow window. 90 yards from our forward position. Standard assault requires flamethrower approach. Estimated casualties, 12 to 18 men. He set the report down, looked at Kowalski. I'm not authorizing your device, but I'm not stopping you either. You get one shot tomorrow. One chance, miss, and you're done. Hit, and maybe we stop losing men at 35 yards. Kowalski nodded. Understood, sir. One more thing. You miss. I'm writing this up. Unauthorized weapons construction, use of military resources without approval. You'll face court-martial. And if I hit? Morrison almost smiled. Then I'll conveniently forget to file the paperwork. November 22nd was 18 hours away. November 22nd, 1944, 1400 hours. Fort Dryant, eastern section of Metz fortifications. Intelligence had identified a German command post in a stone chamber. Ground level. Single narrow window facing west. 40 to 60 defenders in surrounding positions. MG 42 emplacements covering all approaches. Standard assault plan. Artillery bombardment at 1430 hours. Infantry advance at 1445. Flamethrower teams would clear the command post. Expected casualties, 12 to 18 killed or wounded. Expected duration, 40 to 90 minutes. Sustained combat. Lieutenant Morrison presented the alternative at the pre-mission briefing. Company Commander Captain James Whitfield listened without interrupting. Battalion staff officers stood around a map table. Terrain features marked in grease pencil. German positions circled in red. Private Kowalski has developed an improvised incendiary delivery system, Morrison said. Effective range 80 to 90 yards. Silent operation. Delivers white phosphorus payload with minimal operator exposure. Captain Whitfield looked up from the map. What kind of delivery system? Spring-loaded launchers, sir. Fires incendiary projectiles. Spring-loaded? Like a catapult? More like a crossbow. Silence in the briefing tent. 3 staff officers stared at Morrison. One started to speak. Stopped. Whitfield set down his grease pencil. A crossbow in 1944. You're serious? Yes, sir. Device has been tested. 3 successful ignitions at ranges between 68 and 82 yards. Tested where? Abandoned quarry, 3 miles northwest. 0500 hours yesterday. Whitfield turned to his S2 intelligence officer. Major Chen, you saw smoke yesterday morning. 6 miles northwest, you remember? Yes, sir. Assumed it was combat engineering demolition work. It was Private Kowalski testing a medieval siege weapon. Whitfield looked at Morrison. How many shots has this device fired? 3, sir. 3. And you want to use it in combat against a high-value target with 7 enemy officers present? Yes, sir. What happens if it fails? If the projectile misses? If it doesn't ignite? We proceed with standard assault. Flamethrowers, estimated 12 to 18 casualties. Whitfield was quiet for 30 seconds. He studied the map. The German command post was 90 yards from the forward American position. Direct line of sight through the window. Standard flamethrower approach would cross 150 yards of open ground under MG-42 fire. He looked at the casualty estimates, 12 to 18 men, written in his own handwriting from this morning's planning session. "Bring Kowalski in." Morrison left. Returned 2 minutes later with Kowalski carrying the launcher. 12 pounds of steel pipe and spring mechanisms. It looked exactly like what it was. Improvised, unauthorized, built from salvaged truck parts. Whitfield examined it without touching it. "You built this?" "Yes, sir." "How confident are you it will hit a 2-foot window at 90 yards? Accuracy during testing was plus or minus 8 yards at 82 yards. Window is 2 feet wide. Margin of error is acceptable for the target size." "That's not what I asked." "How confident are you?" Kowalski met his eyes. 60%, sir." 60%. "Yes, sir." "You want to risk this mission on 60% odds?" "I want to risk one shot on 60% odds instead of risking 12 to 18 men on worse odds, sir." Whitfield looked at the launcher again, at the crude sights welded to the pipe, at the spring mechanism that looked like it came from a truck suspension. "If you miss, we proceed with standard assault. If you hit, you might have just saved a dozen lives. If the device fails catastrophically and kills friendly personnel, I'll court-martial you personally." "Understood, sir." "You have one shot. Make it count." 14:30 hours. Kowalski moved to a rubble wall 90 yards from the target chamber. Sergeant Murphy provided security. Private Clark carried 2 additional bolts as backup ammunition. The rest of the squad took assault positions per standard protocol. The rubble wall offered good cover. Chest-high stone blocks from a collapsed building. Stable firing platform. Clear line of sight to the target window. German MG-42 positions were active. Periodic fire across no man's land. Standard suppression. The German defenders had no indication of American activity at the rubble wall. 90 yards was beyond typical infantry engagement range. They were watching for movement at 40 to 50 yards, not 90. Kowalski set the launcher on the rubble, braced it against stone blocks. The tactical situation was simple. One window, 90 yards. Wind from the west at 3 to 5 miles per hour. Slight upward trajectory required. Temperature 62 degrees Fahrenheit. Humidity low. Good conditions for ballistic accuracy. Murphy used a rangefinder. 90 yards exactly. Wind 3 miles per hour. Gusting to 5. Kowalski calculated corrections. Test fire at 82 yards, used 32-degree angle. 90 yards required 33 degrees, maybe 34. Wind drift at 90 yards, approximately 1 foot right. Correction, aim 1 foot left of window center. He adjusted the launcher angle, sighted through the crude notch and post. The window was small in the sight picture, 2 feet wide, 3 feet tall. Officers visible inside, moving, studying maps on a table. Clark handed him a bolt. "Fuse is armed. Don't drop it." Kowalski loaded the bolt into the launch rail. 18 inches of steel, 3.2 pounds, white phosphorus and jellied gasoline payload. He compressed the spring, 3 inches, 60 pounds of force. The catch engaged. The launcher was ready. Behind him, Captain Whitfield watched through field glasses, Lieutenant Morrison beside him. 8 squad members in firing positions, everyone watching the window, watching Kowalski, waiting to see if medieval technology and modern chemistry could do what 70-pound flamethrowers couldn't. German officers were still visible through the window. 7 of them. Ranks visible on uniforms. 2 Hauptmann, 2 Major, 2 Oberstleutnant, 1 Oberst. Command staff planning operations, making decisions that would cost American lives in the next 48 hours. Kowalski checked the sight picture one final time. Window centered. Wind correction applied. Angle calculated. His finger rested on the trigger. MG-34 sear mechanism. 6-pound pull weight. "Whenever you're ready," Murphy said quietly. Kowalski exhaled halfway, held the breath, squeezed the trigger. 14:47 hours and 26 seconds. The spring released. The bolt launched at approximately 180 feet per second. The recoil slammed into Kowalski's shoulder. 8 pounds of force transferred through the frame. The sound was a sharp metallic snap, followed by the whoosh of the projectile. Quieter than rifle fire, quieter than artillery, almost silent. The bolt flew in a flat arc, tumbled slightly in flight, corrected. Traveled 90 yards in 1.8 seconds. It entered the window opening, cleared the right edge by 4 inches, passed through the 2-foot gap, continued into the chamber, impacted the stone floor 6 feet from the nearest officer. The glass vial shattered on impact. Spring-loaded pin broke through. White phosphorus contacted air. Chemical reaction occurred in milliseconds. Temperature spiked to 1,300 degrees Fahrenheit. The jellied gasoline ignited. Fire erupted across a 12-foot radius. 14:47 hours and 28 seconds. 2 seconds after launch. All 7 German officers were within the blast radius. Fire spread across uniforms, across maps, across wooden furniture. The white phosphorus burned through fabric into skin. Couldn't be extinguished. Couldn't be stopped. Screaming started. Audible at 90 yards, multiple voices. Officers tried to exit. The doorway was on the opposite side of the chamber, 25 feet away, through fire. 2 officers reached the door. Both were burning. Both collapsed before getting through. 14:47 hours and 33 seconds. 7 seconds after impact. Smoke billowed from the window, thick, black. Chemical smoke from burning phosphorus and gasoline. The screaming intensified, then stopped, then resumed, then stopped again. German MG-42 positions opened fire. Random directions, no target identified. The defenders knew something had happened, saw the smoke, heard the screaming, didn't know where the attack originated. No muzzle flash, no artillery, no aircraft. Fire had appeared from nowhere. 14:47 hours and 40 seconds. 14 seconds after impact. Fire continued burning inside the chamber. Temperature estimated at 1,400 degrees Fahrenheit. No movement visible through the window. Smoke obscured everything. Murphy lowered his binoculars. Jesus Christ. Private Clark stared at the smoke. 90 yards, through a 2-foot window, with truck springs. Captain Whitfield keyed his radio. "Battalion, this is Charlie 6. Target neutralized. Repeat. Command post neutralized. 0 friendly casualties." German MG-42 fire slowed. Stopped. Defenders were confused. Disorganized. Command structure destroyed. At 14:51 hours, 4 minutes after the shot, a white flag appeared from an adjacent bunker, then another, then 3 more. 23 German soldiers emerged with hands raised. All mentioned fire weapon in initial interrogation. None saw where the attack originated. They described fire from the sky. Silent fire. No warning, no defense. Intelligence Officer Major Chen entered the chamber at 15:30 hours after the fire died. 7 German officers confirmed dead, 4 from burns, 3 from smoke inhalation. Bodies identified: Hauptmann Otto Schneider, Hauptmann Friedrich Weber, Major Klaus Richter, Major Wilhelm Braun, Oberstleutnant Hans Kessler, Oberstleutnant Ernst Meyer, Oberst Johann Hartmann. Documents recovered. Tactical maps, defensive plans, radio codes. Planned counterattack for November 24th prevented. Intelligence value, high. American casualties, 0. Captain Whitfield found Kowalski at 1600 hours. Kowalski was cleaning the launcher. Standard maintenance. Murphy was beside him. Private, that was either the luckiest shot I've ever seen or the most precisely calculated. Calculated, sir. Spring tension, trajectory angle, wind correction. The math worked. The math killed 7 enemy officers and prevented 12 friendly casualties. Yes, sir. Whitfield looked at the launcher, at the device that looked like medieval equipment built in a motor pool. I'm recommending immediate manufacturing authorization. How many of these can you build? With help? 2 per day, maybe 3. Start building. I want 6 operational by November 30th. Sir, I should mention this device violates approximately 15 regulations regarding unauthorized weapons, and private regulations are written in Washington by people who don't watch men die at 35 yards. You just saved 12 lives with truck springs and chemistry. I'll handle the regulations. You handle the manufacturing. Kowalski nodded. Yes, sir. But even as Whitfield walked away, even as the innovation began spreading through Third Army engineer detachments, even as German defenders started fearing the silent fire weapon, the launcher was already disappearing from official history. No designation would be assigned, no manual written, no supply chain established. 43 flamethrower operators had died before November 22nd. 0 died in the next 18 days. The math had changed. The innovation worked. Nobody at Army Ordnance Department would ever approve it. November 23rd, 1600 hours. 3 engineer detachments requested technical specifications from Kowalski. Word spread through the 5th Infantry Division the same way most battlefield innovations spread. Not through official channels, through soldiers who watched flamethrower operators die and decided there had to be a better way. Sergeant Murphy wrote the instructions. 12 pages, hand-drawn diagrams, material specifications, assembly procedures, projectile fabrication steps. He made 3 copies using carbon paper, distributed them to requesting units. By November 25th, 3 additional launchers were operational. The variations started immediately. 11th Infantry Regiment added a German MG-42 bipod for stability. Added 3 pounds, but improved accuracy. 90th Infantry Division built a shorter version. 2-foot barrel instead of 3. Reduced range to 60 to 70 yards, but decreased reload time to 4 seconds. Combat Engineers Battalion added a shoulder stock from a rifle. Better aiming control. Every unit modified the basic design based on available materials and tactical requirements. No standardization, no quality control. Just engineers building what worked with what they had. First combat use by another unit came November 26th. Fort Jeanne d'Arc. Corporal Martin Webb from 11th Infantry engaged an MG-42 position at 75 yards. Direct hit. 4 German defenders killed. Position neutralized. 0 American casualties. Webb's after-action report: like throwing grenades without leaving cover. November 29th. Sergeant Paul Rodriguez, 90th Division, used his launcher against a German-held building in Metz city center. Fired 3 bolts through second-story windows. Building fire forced evacuation. 12 Germans captured. Standard assault would have required house-to-house fighting. Estimated casualties avoided: 8 to 12 friendly, 15 to 20 enemy. December 1st. Private Thomas Bailey. Combat engineers targeted an ammunition depot at 95 yards. Longest successful shot recorded. Secondary explosions destroyed the depot. German counterattack prevented. Bailey credited Kowalski's manual for proper trajectory calculations. By December 10th, 47 bunker clearance operations had been conducted using launchers. Casualty statistics told the story. Pre-launcher average, 3.2 casualties per operation. Post-launcher average, 1.15 casualties per operation. Reduction, 64% decrease in friendly casualties. Operational success rate increased from 78% to 94%. Enemy casualties, 83 confirmed German deaths from launcher attacks. 127 captured due to launcher-induced surrenders. But official recognition remained absent. Battalion reports called it improvised incendiary delivery system, without technical details. No Army designation assigned, no supply chain established, no training program created. Knowledge spread engineer to engineer, manual to manual, soldier to soldier. German intelligence noticed the pattern December 3rd. Radio intercepts mentioned American silent fire weapons. Initial assessment, new flamethrower variant. But flamethrowers didn't operate at 80 to 90 yards silently. German command was confused. Multiple reports described fire from sky with no gunfire signature, no launch signature, no warning. Defenders described fire appearing without explanation. Psychological impact was significant. December 5th. German units began boarding windows on ground-level chambers. Reduced launcher effectiveness, but also reduced German observation capability. American response. Target doorways instead. Larger openings, harder to defend. December 8th. German officers stopped gathering in single locations, dispersed command posts, prevented mass casualty events like Fort Driant, but reduced command efficiency, slowed decision-making. Captured German documents from December 15th included tactical assessment. American forces employ silent incendiary launcher, effective range approximately 70 to 90 meters. Weapon delivers phosphorus payload with high accuracy. No thermal signature prior to impact. Recommend: avoid clustering personnel, board all ground-level openings, increase roving patrols. German countermeasures reduced launcher effectiveness, but didn't eliminate the threat. More importantly, countermeasures based on incorrect assumptions. Germans never captured an intact launcher, never understood the spring mechanism, assumed chemical propellant. Tactical adaptation helped, but couldn't stop the innovation. Radio intercepts from December 20th. Enemy's silent fire weapon has psychological effect disproportionate to actual deployment frequency. The reputation exceeded the reality. That was the innovation's greatest advantage. Army Ordnance Department evaluation came December 18th. Technical team from Paris. Lead evaluator, Major Robert Chen, weapons development. 3 launchers inspected. 2 tests fired. Technical assessment completed in 4 hours. Chen's conclusion: device functions as described. Effective range 75 to 100 yards. Silent operation confirmed. Improvised construction limits, reliability, and standardization. His recommendation: do not adopt as standard equipment. Reasoning: non-standard ammunition, no supply chain, hand-fabricated construction, quality control impossible, limited tactical application, safety concerns with white phosphorus handling, existing equipment already approved. Captain Whitfield submitted counter-argument. Ordnance concerns about standardization ignore battlefield reality. Improvised launchers saves lives. Flamethrowers kill operators. Math favors innovation. Result: no official adoption, no prohibition either. Status: allowed in field use, but not supported by supply chain. December 22nd. Metz fell. German garrison surrendered. Urban fortress warfare phase ended. Third Army advanced toward German border. Terrain changed. Open country. Reduced bunker warfare. Launcher tactical relevance dropped significantly. December 28th, last recorded launcher deployment. Saar River crossing. After that, Third Army operations shifted to mobile warfare. Launchers were no longer tactically relevant. Units abandoned them, destroyed them, left them behind. Total operational period, 38 days. November 22nd to December 28th, 1944. June 1945. Raymond Kowalski discharged at Camp Kilmer, New Jersey. Returned to Detroit, found his old job at Ford River Rouge plant. Tool and die maker. Same work he'd done before the war. Precision manufacturing. Tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. He worked there 38 years, retired 1983, age 63, married Margaret in 1947. 2 children, 4 grandchildren. Ordinary life. Unremarkable career. When people asked about military service, he said he fixed equipment, kept things running, never mentioned Fort Driant, never mentioned 7 German officers, never mentioned the innovation that saved 40 to 60 American lives. Possibly he thought it was unauthorized. Possibly he saw it as desperation, not innovation. Possibly he believed other engineers' contributions were equal. Possibly he didn't think it mattered. March 15, 1992. Raymond Kowalski died. Age 72, Detroit. Obituary in Detroit. Free Press, March 18th. Raymond Kowalski, 72, tool and die maker, Ford Motor Company retiree. Served U.S. Army 1943 to 1945, European theater. Survived by wife Margaret, children Patricia and Robert, 4 grandchildren. Services Friday, St. Hedwig Catholic Church. No mention of the launcher. No mention of Fort Driant. No mention of the 64% casualty reduction. No mention of German officers or silent fire weapons or medieval technology adapted for modern warfare. 2008. Military historian researching Metz campaign found reference in 5th Infantry Division after-action reports. Improvised incendiary delivery system, effective bunker clearance. No technical details, no inventor named. The historian searched battalion records, found Kowalski's name in engineering logs, attempted contact. Discovered he'd died 16 years earlier. The historian's conclusion: estimated 40 to 60 American lives saved directly. Unknown number of German casualties prevented through surrenders. Innovation period, 38 days. Official legacy, none. Historical record, 3 paragraphs in division records. That's how battlefield innovation works. Problems kill soldiers. Frontline personnel improvise solutions. Effectiveness drives informal adoption. Official institutions resist change. Conditions shift. Innovation disappears. Raymond Kowalski built a crossbow that shot white phosphorus. Killed 7 enemy officers in 14 seconds. Changed bunker clearance doctrine for 38 days. Saved dozens of American lives. Then returned to Detroit and never talked about it. His obituary mentioned military service. Didn't mention that he'd solved a problem that killed 43 men by thinking about physics instead of tactics. Didn't mention that he'd turned truck springs and chemistry into a weapon that German command took seriously enough to change: defensive doctrine. Army ordnance never approved it, never designated it, never manufactured it. After Metz fell, it disappeared. Just another improvised solution that worked until conditions changed and nobody needed it anymore. 3 paragraphs remain in 5th Infantry Division historical records. 3 paragraphs about a tool and die maker from Detroit who saw men dying at 35 yards and built something better from salvaged parts. 3 paragraphs that don't mention his name or explain how the device worked, or acknowledge that sometimes the best military innovations come from mechanics who refuse to accept that good men have to die, following regulations written by people who've never watched friends bleed out in no man's land. If this story moved you, please take a moment to like this video. It helps us share more forgotten stories from World War II. Subscribe to stay connected with these untold histories. Each one matters. Each one deserves to be remembered. We'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below telling us where you're watching from. Our community spans from Michigan to Germany to Australia. From veterans to history enthusiasts, you're part of something special here. These men innovated under impossible circumstances. They solved problems that killed their friends. Most of them never received recognition. But we remember them. You help us remember them. Thank you for watching. Thank you for keeping these stories alive. Raymond Kowalski deserves better than 3 paragraphs in a forgotten battalion report. And you just gave him that.